Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this meeting of the Southern Planning Committee. We are not expecting a fire drill today. In the event of the alarm sounding, please leave the building and gather at the front of the building. I am obliged to inform you that this meeting is being live streamed and recorded. Could I also ask you to please ensure that your mobile phones are switched off? In order that those watching the live stream know who is speaking, could members and officers introduce themselves prior to speaking? To ensure the members of this committee and all points raised by the public speakers are properly heard, I must advise you that I will not tolerate any disruptive behaviour. This is a meeting held in public, not a public meeting, and if such behaviour takes place and persists, I will adjourn the meeting. I shall now ask members of the committee and officers to introduce themselves.
Councillor Ed Potter, Shropshire Councillor for the Lowton Division.
Councillor Caroline Bagnall, I represent Roseley.
Councillor Tony Parsons, representing Baston Hill, Colham and Sutton.
Councillor Robert Tindall, representing Brown Key Division.
Councillor Christian Lee, representing Bridge North East and Astley Upwards.
Councillor Hilary Luff, representing Church Stretton and Craven Arms.
Councillor Nigel Lumley, representing Albrighton Ward.
Councillor Roger Evans, substitute member representing the Longdon Division.
Louise Evans, Principal Planning Officer.
Tabitha Liv, Planning and Development Services Manager.
Charlotte Morrison, Area Planning Manager for the South.
Councillor Nick Hignott from Bay Valley Ward, Vice Chair of this committee, but I'm chairing this meeting today in the absence of David Evans, Chair.
Kim Brown, Solicitor.
Tim Ward, Committee Officer.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda, apologies for absence. I have them here. Apologies for absence have been received from Councillors Andy Boddington, David Evans and Richard Huffer, and Councillor Roger Evans is substituting for Councillor Richard Huffer. Next item, to confirm the minutes of the Southern Planning Committee meeting held on 14th of February 2023. Proposed Councillor Parsons and seconded Councillor Bagnall. Thank you. Next item, public question time.
No public questions, Chair.
Thank you. Item 4 on the agenda, disclosable pecuniary interests. Councillor Lomby.
I'm the ward councillor for item 5, so I'll be speaking against it and then I'll leave the room.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, thank you. So we'll move straight on to item 5 on the agenda, land to the west of County Lane, Albrighton, Shropshire. And we'll pass over to the officer, please, for their report.
Thank you, Chair. This application at land to the west of County Lane, Albrighton, is for a solar generating facility with a capacity of up to 16 megawatts. It comprises ground-mounted solar photovoltaic panels, a battery storage facility, along with a fence of up to 2.5 litres high, sorry, with CCTV and associated infrastructure, along with mitigation measures outlined in the report. The site area is 30.35 hectares, comprising currently of 3 arable fields. The applicant considers that the site would meet the energy needs of around 5,300 homes and a reduction of approximately 3,600 tonnes of CO2. The site would have an operational life of 40 years and construction works are expected to take around 6 months. At the time the report was written, 6 objections had been received, which included objections from a councillor and Albrighton Parish Council. Full details of these Responses are available online and they are outlined in the report. The first issue is that of greenbelt. The site is located on designated greenbelt where inappropriate development is not acceptable unless it is justified by very special circumstances. These circumstances can be an accumulation of factors, and for this application, the view is that very special circumstances have been demonstrated. More outlined in the report, but these have included the need for renewable energy and its role in meeting the challenges of climate change, the lack of alternative sites and the need to locate the site near to an existing substation, support for the rural economy, wider environmental benefit, including planned biodiversity net gain, the temporary and reversible nature of the proposal, and although there are some impact on the openness of the greenbelt, this has been mitigated as far as possible given the site constraints. It is obviously for the decision maker to determine what weight to apply to the circumstances as fully outlined in the report. So, landscape and visual impact. The applicant submitted a landscape and visual impact assessment. The most adverse visual effects are limited to close distance and locations where the development is visible through gaps in hedges and field openings. Visibility into the site is limited in the summer months by the dense hedgerow, and officers consider that the orchard will also have a reducing effect. That's the orchard that's proposed through the application.
Where is it?
Tim, can we get the next? There's a plan with the orchard on it. Should be.
Well, don't worry, we'll come into it anyway.
The next issue then is glint and glare. The effects of glint and glare and their impact have been analysed in detail, and officers consider that once mitigation measures are introduced as required by condition, there will not be any further need for mitigation in that context. Heritage and archaeology. Officers have considered and reviewed the information submitted, a heritage impact assessment, along with the zone of theoretical visibility plan, which I think is on your papers, and concluded there's less than substantial harm. The public benefits of the scheme are in this case considered to outweigh the less than substantial harm caused to the heritage assets as outlined in the report. Noise is the next consideration. As with all development, there's likely to be some disruption during the construction phase. The recommendation does include a construction management plan. Highways. The NPPF states that development should only be prevented or refused on highways grounds where there would be an unacceptable impact on highway safety or the cumulative impact would be severe. The designated route for infrastructure to be shipped on 12-metre containers on 15.4-metre long articulated vehicles is to be via county lane. Passing places and banksmen can be provided if necessary. The objection received related to the access and the need to cross third-party land has been considered and the swept path analysis redone. This has confirmed that the applicant would not require access to any third-party land in order to enter and exit the site. Ecology. The layout has been designed in order to avoid any hedgerows and trees already on the site. The scope of the proposed mitigation measures are sufficient to entirely mitigate the adverse biodiversity impacts and deliver significant gains. Design measures to enhance biodiversity include the creation of 24 hectares of grassland, 4.4 hectares of species-rich meadow outside the perimeter fence, 3.34 hectares of orchard planting, some structured woodland. The perimeter ensures the inclusion of small mammal passages and there are 10 bird and 10 bat boxes. There will also be suitable tree protection measures to protect the existing trees. In conclusion, given what's been outlined and as demonstrated in the report, officers recommend that the application be approved subject to conditions as outlined in the report and an additional condition relating to a battery management plan. Chair.
Thank you. Members have any questions for the planning officer before we go on to speakers? Okay, thank you. So then we have 3 speakers on this application. And first is Sarah Dakin, please. Press the right hand button.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay.
So I strongly oppose the application proposed. The entrance will be sited directly opposite ours, and it is impossible for a tractor and trailer or HGV to access the site without going onto our property. I believe the gateway is to be widened, taking out precious hedgerow, making it even more impossible for the entrance gates and compound beyond to be screened from us. It will be a gross intrusion to residences and our alpaca business. We are breeders, a local tourist attraction and glamping site with walking experiences and therapy sessions. A large part of our clientele have special educational needs from schools, PTSD from RAF Cosford and emotional needs from the local CAMS hospital, all visiting for the quiet and peaceful open rural countryside to improve mental health. Instead, they will be greeted with a prison-style security gates and cameras and an industrial compound which will still be there after construction. We have been completely ignored by the developers as a business and our residents being omitted from the plan, even though a representative did a site visit. At our request, no mitigation has been offered by developers in the form of better screening or of different access to the site or entrance or measures to minimise impact on us during or after the construction. The proposal goes against government planning policies 141 before concluding that very special circumstances exist to justify changes to the greenbelt. The policy-making authority should be able to demonstrate that it has examined fully all other reasonable options for meeting its identified need for development. There is no evidence of investigating non-greenbelt land in this proposal. 185. Development should be appropriate for location, taking into account effects on health, living conditions and the natural environment. Mitigate noise, giving rise to significant adverse impacts on health and the quality of life. I refer to the construction phase and noise of cooling fans in the containers right next to my breeding alpacas. They should identify and protect tranquil areas which have remained relatively undisturbed for prize and recreational amenity. I refer to our alpaca tourist attraction. Very special circumstances. Developers are aware that the residents of Albrighton won't benefit from the generation of power as the lines provide and serve I-54, but instead have been offered a community fund as an incentive. NPPF 149 regards the construction of new buildings as inappropriate in the Greenbelt. There will be giant batteries housed in shipping container buildings. They are known fire hazards and the developers have not included a fire policy or consulted the local fire brigades. County Lane from the bridge to be passed and proposed development entrance is adopted and maintained by Staffordshire Council. Staffordshire Highways have not been consulted on this proposal. In summary, planning policies and decisions should ensure that new development can be integrated effectively with existing businesses and community facilities, avoid significant adverse effects on new developments. The applicant should be required to provide suitable mitigation before the development has been completed. I urge members of the committee to vote against these damaging proposals. If they can't, at least postpone a decision to consult local fire brigades, Staffordshire Council on the suitability of County Lane for the development, allowing also for mitigation to be decided for us as a local tourist attraction. The development will have a hedgerow increased to 2.5 metres to try and hide the fence and multiple cameras. This will not allow horse riders to see the oncoming vehicles around the bends and will exclude light from the lane. The current hedge is 1.3 metres and we have around 200 horses that are there. Yeah, okay. I wasn't sure whether that was, sorry. Okay, that's me done.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. That was that one.
Yeah.
Sorry, I haven't seen a list of the speakers and what capacity are speaking. Probably I've missed lately, but I'm sure you're the farmer of the apple.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is that High House?
No.
Sorry.
In fact, it would be better if there was a different map on there and it would show exactly where we are. There is 2 or 3, in fact 4 others maps that are far better than that.
Yeah,
Sorry.
have you lifted the wrong place? Thanks, sorry.
Okay, thank you. We're right in the bottom right-hand corner,
Yes,
just by the entrance.
I have been there this morning, but.
Lovely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is local member, councillor Nigel Lumby. Nigel, you have 5 minutes. Thank you.
Okay, members, I'll start with cumulative effect. Mr. French, the senior planner last time for the Pepper Hill solar application, the applications needed to have been approved to be considered for cumulative effect, so dismissed this application as it was pending. Well, we now have this application as a substantive one where Pepper Hill has been granted, so you must now consider that for the cumulative effect of solar farms within that area. My ward in Greenbelt will, if you approve, have 3 large solar farms in one ward, all together in a band bordering Staffordshire. I fear for the areas north and south of the A41 because they're the only 2 remaining areas left and they'll be next. Paragraph 79 of the MPPF states that the fundamental aim of Greenbelt policy is to prevent urban sprawl by keeping land permanently open. The essential characteristics of Greenbelts are their openness and permanence. As stated in the Tong application before you later, if it still is, openness in case law, whether a key characteristic of Greenbelt openness would be harm. And the issue of visual impact on Greenbelt was further clarified by the Supreme Court. The court held that openness was a broad concept in relation to Greenbelt and not necessarily related to the quality of the landscape. Emerging policy DP16 Part 4 developments should avoid Shropshire's most versatile agricultural land, 1, 2 and 3A, wherever possible, unless the need for and benefit of the development justifies the scale and nature of the loss. The proposed site is 24 hectares of 3A quality and only 6 hectares of 3B. This means that 80% of the development is best land. The application has failed to demonstrate need and benefit against the loss of agricultural land to food production as used at present. A council that has defended its strict interpretation of policy to keep the maximum non-developed barrier, Greenbelt, has now got to balance its encouragements of solar farms. There is a lack of Shropshire Council policy around solar farms within the Greenbelt, probably because the starting base is it's inappropriate. The council needs to consider, as well as energy safety, the emerging issue of food safety and the loss of farming land. On the planning portal, I put a piece about food security, none of which has made it to the officer's report. One bit that I found scary in that, they're not putting it in. The Global Food Security Index examines food security comprehensively, considering 3 core issues of affordability, availability and quality of food worldwide. The UK currently ranks 17 in the world, but with most other countries improving their score. In contrast, the UK's rating is decreasing, and that's from the Soil Association. Road safety. The road from the A41 and the site entrance is narrow with few passing points. The site visit today demonstrated that. Few of which are large enough for the articulated vehicles planned for the construction phase. I saw the passing place plan and I raised an eyebrow. Members will have seen the lane this morning. Whilst it's accepted that this can be controlled within the traffic management plan, consideration must be given to the size of the vehicles. The site entrance is preceded by a sharp bend. Articulated vehicles negotiating into the site entrance will present motorists with stopped or slow-moving vehicles as they come round the bend. I think a condition should be that there should be no articulated vehicles that are used. We did it before with the quarry near Shrewsbury, restricting it to rigid lorries. Tired of statistics? These solar farms keep hitting us in waves. The site at 24 hectares of BMV land is 0.00068% of BMV land supply in England. What's the point of statistics like that? At least we've been spared the twice as many golf courses than solar panel statistics, but I haven't, because you'll notice that's in the Kemberton one next. But seriously, have you ever seen an application ask for a little house in an extended area? It's only 0.00001% of the total land available in England. We do that for normal planning. Anyway, I've nearly run out of time. The applicant's consultant, wheat or sheep, there is no loss of BMV agricultural land. That's like saying you use an Arctic lorry to deliver your groceries. It's just inappropriate. Do you know, oh, mine stopped 4 minutes and 43. I kept looking at that. Okay, thank you.
And our last speaker is Nick Barber, the applicant, please. Do you have 3 minutes, Mr. Barber?
Is it just the? Yeah. I'm Nick Barber, and I'm the development manager working on County Lane Solar Farm. I would like to focus on the benefits arising from the development to put the scheme into context. From a climate change standpoint, the project will produce electricity for around 5,300 homes each year and remove emissions from the national grid equivalent to approximately 2,280 petrol cars for 40 years. It will also create 53 acres of species-rich pasture, 11 acres of wildflower meadow, 8 acres of traditional orchard planting, 690 metres of new hedgerows and half an acre of new woodland. This will lead to a 99% biodiversity net gain per habitats and a 240% net gain per hedgerow unit that would all be secured for the life of the scheme by virtue of a planning consent. Economically, the scheme will allow £11.5 million to be invested in the site, creating approximately 72 temporary jobs, 5 permanent jobs, and supporting a local and historic agricultural enterprise by using outlying field to that business. The project will contribute around £1.8 million in business rates over its lifetime and allow an important upgrade to the Beaman Lane substation, making the local network more resilient. It will also deliver a local community fund of £10,000 per annum for 40 years, and we've been in early discussions with potential recipients. We originally consulted with the local community during the autumn of 2021. In addition to meeting with the parish council, this culminated in 2,500 leaflets being sent to residential properties within a 2.5 kilometre radius of the site, with responses invited via the website and project team. Whilst we can never satisfy everyone, we took note of responses and made efforts to change the application. We made design changes, such as moving the substation area into a less visible part of the site. We reduced the height of the solar panels and placed more substantial screening along the southern boundary. We also added a large area of traditional orchard planting on land outside the fence line to the north and east to enhance screening, balance food production concerns, and offset national losses in orchards highlighted by recent National Trust research. There is emerging evidence that the planting of fruit trees is one of the best ways to complement pollinator gains created by the new habitats within the wider site, boosting productivity. We acknowledge every planning decision is balanced, and we work within an increasingly challenging environment to find viable sites with acceptable limited levels of impact that is capable of delivering cheap, clean, renewable energy. This is one which can deliver significant environmental and economic benefits over its lifetime, and I hope the committee feel able to follow the officer's recommendation and support it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Barber. Any members have any questions for Mr. Barber before he leaves the chair? Before he's left the chair? Yeah. Too quick for me, but that's okay then. No, thank you very much. Right, thank you. So now I open the debate to members, please. Councillor Love.
Thank you. Visiting the site this morning, my biggest concern is the entrance and the access for the construction of it. It is very narrow. There are passing places, but it was incredibly muddy. And I would really want to know what could be done to convince me that it could be without completely tearing up that road. How could it be constructed? Because that road is so narrow. You know, in their construction policy, what have they come up with? Because I can't really see anything here that I know they've got passing places, but it's going to. I mean, the road's going to need resurfacing afterwards, is in my opinion, after these lorries have gone up there. That's my big concern about this application.
Okay, thank you. Officer, do you want to come back on that? Or do you want to wait until the end? Okay, thank you. Yes, Councillor Parsons.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I have a similar issue, and that is the county lane entrance to this particular site. And I do believe that it does need conditioning if this application is to go forward. It isn't suitable, in my opinion, for articulated trucks. I mean, I think it is probably capable of taking a smaller truck, because we saw as we came down that route, Kingswood Equestrian Centre and presumably horse boxes and vehicles of that size probably use that route on a fairly regular basis. But it was very tight for an articulated truck, and just before you got to the entrance, you had to cross that very narrow railway bridge over the main line. And so I do think that's an issue, and I don't know how we can manage that, whether we can make sure that if those trucks have to go down that route, that there will be banksmen or whatever to, because if it met any other traffic coming in the opposite direction, it just wouldn't get by. It's not suitable. I also understand the local members' frustration about this being the third application for a solar farm in a fairly small area of his particular ward. We did see the one that's actually been built and in operation, and it was very well screened. You would not. It was very difficult to see where it was. It wasn't easy to find. And so I think if this one is screened in a similar way, it may be okay. But I would have thought that 3 in the area is probably enough, or more than enough. Thank you.
Councillor Temple.
My concern is, like the two previous speakers, is the nature of the access road, the narrowness of the highway. That really does worry me. And whilst it might be improved during construction, I wonder what will happen to the state of the road after construction. So I need a lot of reassurance about that. I'm not necessarily against it because it's in the green belt, but the NPPF does rather lead one to think that perhaps there are exceptional circumstances to building in the green belt. And I suppose, and I'm being devil's advocate here, that as it's not a permanent structure, it will, I think, have a life expectancy of 40 years. I'm not sure whether that's the material expectancy, the life of the materials, or whether it will only last 40 years, but that doesn't really matter. The other thing I'd like to comment on is that if you stand where the proposed access is, and Christian was very kindly showed me where that be, having missed the official site visit, that land slopes away to the west quite considerably. So I think it will be quite visible from that road, which is at the top of the location plan. I'm not quite sure what that road is. Is that Beamish Lane or whatever it was called? We've got County Lane on the east side. And the Beamish Lane is the north lane. Is that right? Can someone help me out here, please?
Yeah, it's Beamish.
It is Beamish Lane. Thank you. That's where my postcode took me this morning. and no further, was not going to take me down County Lane, whatever I gave it. So there we are. That's my. I'm not sure I've said anything really very positive, other than the narrowness of the highway access, and my concern that it will be seen, presumably from much further away than just Beamish Lane. Thank you, sorry.
Fine. We'll talk if you've finished till you've pressed your button.
Yeah, sorry, I have finished, I promise.
Okay, so there are concerns about the access to it. Sorry, Councillor Potter.
Just a quick comment. It says at 2.221, the application site is approximately 30.06 hectares, comprising of agricultural land. And I think members of the committee will remember when we last had a solar farm application. My concern is around the use of agricultural land for balancing food security and energy security. Is the whole site currently a permanent pasture, or is it any of it used for arable?
I think I've noticed certainly on the, sorry, Chairman, can I, on the north side, it's a long time since I was involved. It's either winter barley or winter wheat.
So they couldn't.
That's, if you stand at the access and look sort of northeastwards, that's an arable cropping.
Yeah.
I'm afraid I'm not really sure about
the report. It wasn't clear as to what the current use of
certainly
the land was.
that
So
section.
if it's being used for if it was permanent pasture, I wouldn't have so many concerns because the use with solar farm would allow for grazing of livestock. But if it's being used for other agricultural purposes as well, in the interest of maintaining having the same position on this application as similar applications, that would prove a concern for me based on the local members' comments around 80% of the site being grade 3A or above.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Evans.
Thank you, Chairman. Most of my comments are on the written report because I didn't know I was coming until this morning. But I do have some concerns about building on green land, green spaces. There needs to be exceptions in order to do it. And I am also told that Staffordshire have a very firm policy about solar farms. And I'm disappointed that Shropshire does not yet have a policy on solar farms, which members were promised some time ago there would be something written down as a planning guidance. I also note in the comments and also the public speaker about community fund. Again, in other parts of the country, there are community funds set up by solar farms for the benefit of the community to give them some solace about it. So at the present time, I'm minded to refuse it because there just doesn't seem to be enough reason to do it, and to have 3 solar farms in such close proximity, and it's being on green land. I think this is a step too far. Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Tyndall.
Yeah, I don't want to quarrel with Roger, but I think the applicant did say there would be a community fund. They're lasting 40 years. It's not quite a large sum of money. It's gone straight to 10,000. So I can't do 40 times 10 in my head. It's okay. It's 400, isn't it? So £400,000 over the life of the solar farm. Is that right?
Yes.
Thank you. So, that's not inconsiderable.
Through you, Chairman, in the report, I didn't think it meant there were discussions going on in the actual report.
Oh, sorry. Well, I just listening to what the applicant said.
Yeah, thank you. We'll get the planning officer a chance to come back and answer those questions. Just make a couple of comments myself because I do have concerns to a certain extent about the access by County Lane. I understand they will be using Banksman, but we were in a minibus this morning, and when we met 1 or 2 vehicles, the passing places were difficult, shall I say, barely adequate. So how they would cope with Arctics and vehicles being able to pass them coming the other way, I'm concerned. The other thing I would like to just question is why the fire authority have not commented on this because I know of similar applications where the fire authority have actually been quite strong in their comments about how they would deal with any fires or incidents on properties like this. So I would like to just have an answer on that. So pass on to the planning officer now, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Members did visit the site this morning. We have got Tim, one of the plans is a passing place plan, just so you can see where the passing places are. The sweat path analysis does show that vehicles of that size can use the access, and we can condition for there to be a banksman to make sure County Lane is clear before any of those vehicles enter the lane. So that would be at either end, and then from the access, so they would clear County Lane and then get the access in, along with some signage about that. There's also in the report anywhere where there is maintainable verge, they can negotiate to create new passing places that will then be filled in after construction. But those are obviously the places I think members saw that the grass verge ditched. They could be made into 6-month temporary passing places if necessary. So that could be a condition for the banksman and extra passing places. Plus, on the entranceways, it might be necessary to carry out some minor curb alignment, and that could be agreed before development commences. On the community fund issue, I just want to be really clear that's not a material consideration, so it cannot be considered in the balance. It's not relevant to determination of the application, so members should not give that any weight at all in the balancing exercise to make a decision. And the batteries, the agent, it was a question that we've been asking this week. We have been provided by the applicant with a called-in application that the Secretary of State determined, in which there wasn't a requirement to consult the fire service, and they will now provide, as in the update sheet, us with a fire management plan for the batteries, which will include fire suppression, 24-hour CCTV monitoring, which would deal with that as an issue and therefore shouldn't need any further mitigation.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Love.
Thank you, Chair. On the site visit this morning, when we were looking at the passing places, a number of those passing places were actually private drives. Have those, is it clear that the owners of those driveways are happy for their drives to be used for passing places? I mean, or are they going to be able to block them off and not use them? I mean, how many of those? Because there was, I think, quite a number of them were actually private drives that were being used. Thank you.
That's obviously a civil matter between the landowners. If the landowners do choose to block off their land by way of fencing it off without an agreement in place with the applicant, they would be able to do that. But that would be a civil matter and not a matter for the planning authority. But yeah, we can't mandate that happens on third party land. It's outside the application area.
Chairman, the applicant's got his hand up.
Yes, I will allow the applicant to
Is it
comment on
possible
that.
to make a clarification? As part of the consultation with Shropshire County Highways, we were presented with information relating to their ownership of the highway. I think it's important to say that, as we are aware from Shropshire County Highways, the passing places and the extent of them are within the adopted highway boundary, whilst they may be adjacent to other.
I'm sorry, Chairman, this is a public meeting being transmitted. Should the comments be made on speaker so that those listening in can actually hear and see what is happening?
Yes, I've taken advice and we're happy with that.
My point is, for clarification, is this in our consultation with Shropshire County Highways, is that the passing places lie within the adopted highway boundary, and as a consequence, we will not be relying on third-party rights with adjacent owners to deliver access and materials to the site. So whilst they may be in areas which we've agreed to a series of conditions in draft with officers which cover much of these items, and whilst it is inconvenient and we acknowledge that it is a difficult lane, for clarity, we do not require third-party access rights over any other third parties. It's adopted highway as it's presented to us.
Okay, thank you. I'm afraid I can't take any other comments from members of the public because you've had your time to speak and this is a debate for the committee. That person was clarifying a point as the applicant.
Very sorry, but I need to clarify a point also, if that's okay.
What is it in relation to?
It's in relation, one, to the arable, it is all arable, and also the passing places. If you look on the comments from Kingswood Equestrian Centre, can I come up so everybody can hear, please? Is that
Okay, yes, make it brief, please.
The passing places, for, there's 4 driveways that belong to Kingswood Equestrian Centre, and they have also made the complaints on against it in the comments, and they have said that yes, they will be blocking off their drives.
Something about arable you said too.
Yeah. Sorry, yeah, I wasn't allowed to answer, obviously, because I wasn't allowed to answer, but yeah, all the whole field, the whole of the land is arable.
That's what I thought.
Okay, thank you. I assume that the transport management plan would cover the fact that some of the driveways may not be usable as passing places, and so therefore they would have to address the issues of whether they could extend the other passing places, i.e. make them manageable for the months when work was going on. But that's just my opinion.
And mine, for what it's worth.
Okay, any other members want to speak, or otherwise does any member want to make a proposal, please?
Not really. I think this is really a very difficult one, and probably the most difficult one. I've had to help make a decision on. I've been on this committee, I think, longer than anybody. Since I always call it unification, but I don't think it means that as it's going unitary. Apart from a couple of months when I was deposed. But not for any wrongdoing, I hasten to add, audience. It was just that I changed political allegiance, and that caused all sorts of trouble. I think we should allow this. If you must take that as a proposal, yes, from me. We accept the officer's recommendation, subject to those conditions that we have been talking about, mainly traffic ones. I'm not convinced it's going to swell the scenic quality. It's not in the area of outstanding natural beauty. And the only reason I'm really not happy, but I am prepared to propose this, is that although it's in the green belt, it does have a life of 40 years. So it's not permanent, like building a housing estate or industrial units on green belt. I don't think those 3 activities are comparable. Better I'm not going to be popular afterwards, but we've got to make a decision one way or another. That's my proposal, Jen.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder?
I'll second
Councillor
it.
Love.
I'll second it, as long as the access is definitely going to be repaired back to how it should, to its original.
Okay. Thank you. So we have a proposal and a seconder to go with the officer's recommendation. So I pass over to solicitor to take the vote.
And that's subject to the additional conditions for the traffic, which Charlie mentioned, and the additional battery management plan. Okay. Okay, if you could indicate whether you're voting for or against, please. Caroline Bagnall,
For.
Roger Evans,
Against.
Christian Lee,
Against.
Hilary Luck. For. Tony Parsons,
For.
Ed Potter,
Against.
Robert Tyndall,
For.
and Nick Hignett.
For.
That's 5 for and 3 against.
Okay, thank you. So we pass on to item 6 on the agenda. Proposed solar farm to the south of Hall Lane, Kemberton, Shifnal. And pass over to the planning officer for their report. Thank you.
Chair. This application is for a proposed solar farm to the south of Hall Lane, Kemberton. The application has a capacity of up to 22 megawatts. It comprises ground-mounted solar photovoltaic panels, a battery storage facility along with a fence of up to 2 metres high, with CCTV and associated infrastructure, along with mitigation measures as outlined in the report. The site area is 19.9 hectares of agricultural land made up of 2 adjacent pasture fields. The site is rural with an industrial area just over 400 metres to the west. Part of the proposal is internal access tracks, which would be required to cross the site to allow access for equipment for maintenance purposes. The access for all phases of the development would be from a new access point located on the B4379 to the west of the site. The applicant considers that the site would meet the energy needs of around 6,000 homes and a reduction of approximately 5,280 tonnes of CO2. The site would have an operational life of 40 years and construction works are expected to take around 6 months. It is also put forward that the development would create 70 jobs during the construction period and 8 jobs throughout the operation of the site. Construction taking 6 months and the development would have, again, a lifespan of 40 years. At the time the report was written, 133 objections have been received. Objections have also been received from Kemberton and Sutton Bassett Parish Council. Full details of these responses are available online and they are outlined in the report. Alternative siting. The siting of a solar farm is constrained by the need to connect to the local electricity distribution network. A site within 3 kilometres of a substation is therefore required. Alternative sites have been considered by the applicant and rejected for reasons which have been outlined in the report. Best and most versatile agricultural land. The applicant has submitted information which demonstrates that 33% of the site area is of best and most versatile grade 3A quality, with 67% being 3B. The agricultural use of the land would be retained for seasonal sheep grazing, and the applicant argues that there would be significant biodiversity enhancements and that the soil would benefit from being taken out of production. Site is located within the greenbelt, where inappropriate development is not acceptable unless it is justified by very special circumstances. These circumstances can be an accumulation of factors, and for this application, the view is that very special circumstances have been demonstrated through the need for renewable energy and its role in meeting the challenge of climate change, the lack of alternative sites and the need to locate the site near to an existing substation, support for the rural economy, wider environmental benefit including planned biodiversity net gain, the temporary and reversible nature of the proposal. Although there will be some impact on the openness and permanence of the greenbelt, this has been mitigated as far as possible given the site constraints. The applicant considers that the site makes a weak contribution to the purpose of including land within the greenbelt. However, the parish council claim that this site is located within a strategic gap because of the industrial area 300 metres to the west. It is for the decision maker to determine what weight to apply to the circumstances as fully outlined in the report. Landscape and visual impact. The applicant submitted a landscape and visual impact assessment. The greatest visual effects identified are moderate to major adverse effects for users of Monarch's Way and for residents of Corcovado, 100 metres away. The low profile of the land coming with level topography means that views to it may be readily screened or filtered by appropriate planting. glint and glare. The effects of the glint and glare and their impacts have been analysed in detail, and officers consider that once mitigation measures are introduced as required by condition, there will not be any further need for mitigation. Heritage and archaeology. Your officers consider that there is likely to be some visual harm to heritage assets, including the Church of St Andrew and to the Campbellton Conservation Area, but that the harm will be less than substantial and therefore should be weighted in the balance of public benefit. Noise. As with all development, there is likely to be some disruption during the construction phase. The recommendation does include again a construction management plan. Highways. The MPPF states that development should only be prevented or refused on highways grounds where there would be an unacceptable impact on highway safety or the cumulative impact would be severe. No off-site mitigation is required and the development is not anticipated to lead to any road safety issues. Permeable gravel roads are to be used for construction traffic travelling inside the site. Ecology. The site has been designed in order to make best use of existing field boundary vegetation. The proposal includes the removal of 2 trees and reduction of 1 hedgerow. This will be offset by new tree planting and 250 metres of new hedgerow. The proposals would create, therefore, a clear biodiversity net gain. In conclusion, officers have made recommendations based on a weighting exercise of all the different material considerations outlined and recommend that on balance this application be approved. Chair.
Okay, thank you. So we move on to speakers, and we have 4 speakers on this application. First speaker is Alan Chatham, speaking against the application. And you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for allowing me to speak about this devastating economic effects that this application will have on our organic family business. This land is not financially insignificant as presented. It is a vital part of our organic agricultural enterprise. I can assure you that we're not against solar, as we have them on our house and farm buildings. My parents bought Brockton Grange in 1944. It's now farmed by the 3rd generation, my son. He has a young family to whom he will be able to pass the farm on to. However, our farm in its current form will be financially unstable, unsustainable without this land, and it will impact on the local economy. With the loss of some jobs, we currently provide full-time employment for 3 local people as well as several relief staff. We achieved organic status in April 2000, which means that no artificial fertiliser or sprays have been used since then. In 2015, we invested heavily to accommodate a herd of 280 spring calving cows with a new milking parlour and grazing infrastructure with cow tracks, fencing and water mains into the land in question. These fields have been grass since 2008, and throughout this time, the amount of organic matter and carbon built up in the soil has been substantial. There is a strong correlation between the levels of organic matter and the amount of carbon sequestration. Organic land is proven on average to have higher levels of organic matter, and any disturbance of this soil will release this carbon into the atmosphere. These fields are proven to be very productive, producing sustainable food, whilst also playing a vital role in capturing carbon. From a food security angle, this solar development will result in a direct loss of 250,000 litres of organic milk, which will result in yet more dairy products being imported with the associated carbon footprint costs. In 2018, we opened a farm shop with vending machines selling our own organic milk and other local products, keeping food miles low, reducing the plastic footprint with reusable glass bottles, and giving local community access to local food. The milk is only gently pasteurised, thereby retaining all the benefits of drinking whole milk, nothing added, nothing taken away. We have customers telling us how good this is all the time. Also, those who are lactose intolerant have found they can drink our milk with no adverse effect. If you approve this application, it will put our whole organic farm business in jeopardy. because this land forms a vital part of it. The applicants have not proven any special circumstances for using this organic green belt land, and it will also adversely impact on the local economy. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Can I ask a question for clarification?
Yes, councillor Tindall.
Yes. Sorry, Mr. Chatham, is this your land?
No, we rent this land.
Oh, you rent it?
We've rented it for the best part of 20 years.
In the past?
Sorry?
How long is your tenancy now?
I tell you, we're on an annual tenancy at the moment.
Right, so you have no security of tenure beyond.
I have no security of tenure, but I've no reason to believe that other than this, if it wasn't for this application, we would carry on farming it.
Yes,
The owners have no interest in farming it themselves.
I understand that the owners are not living there, but this land that you rent on an annual basis is adjacent to the land that you own.
Yes.
Thank you. Sorry, Chairman.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Next speaker is Fred Quartermain, speaking on behalf of the Parish Council.
Thank you. I'm Fred Quartermain. I'm a partner in the Planning and Environment team at Thrings, and I've been asked to speak to you today on behalf of the Kendrick Parish Council and the locals they represent. I wanted to start by setting the context for why I've been asked to talk to you today, and because the residents of Kendrick are broadly supportive of solar, but this proposal is unpopular, overwhelmingly so. That's a reaction born out of significant concerns about the impacts of this development in this location, which are not addressed by or overcome by the application itself. These concerns directly reflect the policy context in which you're asked to determine the application. The site is greenbelt. National policy is clear, it should be protected. It's also clear from the national policy that this type of development is inappropriate in the greenbelt. The officer's report made a lot of reference to the MPPF saying that elements of renewable energy projects are inappropriate. But that's unhelpful. It's the wrong starting point. You have to assess development as a whole. So where any elements make it inappropriate, the whole of the development is inappropriate. It's clear that inappropriate development should only be allowed where very special circumstances are shown. It's intended to be a very high bar. The circumstances should be more than exceptional. Here, the applicant relies on general circumstances. The need to increase solar energy provision in the country. That's undoubtedly an aim that should be supported, but it is not a special circumstance, and it's a long way from being a very special circumstance. It does not justify development being allowed in this location. There are no very special circumstances that justify this development. All of these circumstances are general. Simply put, policy requires you refuse this application on greenbelt grounds alone. In addition, as we've heard, a large part of the site is BMB agricultural land. Again, policy and guidance is clear. Development of this category of land should be avoided. Finally, your heritage and conservation officers have raised concern about the impact of the developments and expressed the view that the proposals are harmful in heritage terms. You're under a statutory duty to preserve and enhance in relation to designated heritage assets. This means not granting permission where there's harm unless there are public benefits that outweigh that harm. As I said, all the benefits of the scheme are general. There are no specific benefits that outweigh that harm. Given the circumstances used to justify the developments are national, the applicant has offered no explanation as to why they limited their site search to Shropshire and Telford. I think in relation to the earlier discussion, a clue of that was given in relation to the restrictive policies that your neighbouring authorities have. There are alternative locations without BMB land outside of the greenbelt in the country, which would be significantly more suitable and deliver the general benefits without the harm that this application causes. In conclusion, it's the wrong development in the wrong location, clearly in conflict with local and national policies, and no specific justifications are offered to explain why there are very special circumstances for this site. As a result, we respectfully ask you to hear the concerns of residents and refuse the application. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. The next speaker is Richard Marshall, local member, and you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Committee, this application is not about whether we agree with solar farms or not, but is most certainly about where they are situated and the potential harmful impact on the local area. I could sit here and wax lyrically about the village of Kemberton that was mentioned in the Doomsday Book, but I only have 5 minutes. To speak about its very rich heritage would take closer to 5 hours, and I promise I wouldn't subject you to that. As you've heard from Mr. Chatham, the land is currently rented by his family for their dairy herd. And as we're all too well aware, farming over the years has gone through some tough times. As a family, they dug in, they diversified, they turned it into an organic farm, they opened the farm shop. They were one of the first in the country to have milk dispensers, and they even appeared on the BBC. They came down with a film crew to do a piece on them. Now, I know Councillor Tyndall was asking about the land. Now, that land takes 24% of the farm, okay? And the landowner has stated that if he didn't have the solar farm go ahead, he would be happy to continue renting that land to the Chatham family, because ultimately, that goose that lays a golden egg that is solar farms and paying the big monies, it would only potentially be the only development in that greenbelt land. Now, within our core strategies, CS5 states development should improve sustainability of rural communities by bringing local economic and community benefits. This development, if permitted, would do the opposite. It would take away a local business and halt the community aspirations to go on to 4th, 5th, and maybe even beyond generations continuing to farm there. That is damaging to the local community and the local economy. CS13 aims to plan positively and diversify the Shropshire economy, supporting enterprise and seeking to deliver sustainable economic growth and prosperous communities. This application in the destruction of the Chatham's dairy business does none of that. Our very own Shropshire plan, that is the bedrock of all council policies, promotes healthy people, healthy economy and healthy environment. The levels of stress that have been created for the Chathams certainly doesn't make for healthy people. The loss of a good local business does not promote healthy economy. The carbon that is locked into the ground with the organic nature of the farm will be released once the construction starts. Yet again, that's not promoting healthy environment. Solar farms are not one of the specific types of development which may be acceptable within the Greenbelt. As such, they comprise inappropriate development and therefore require very special circumstance justification under the NPPF paragraph 147. CS5 advises that new development will be strictly controlled in accordance with national planning policies protecting the countryside and Greenbelt. The applicant selected this site due to its topography and its proximity to the substation on the Halesfield Industrial Estate to the west of the site. They have stated that this is the only location available, and this, along with the need for renewable energy, demonstrates the very special circumstances to take away Greenbelt, close to the village, that the Greenbelt is there is designated to protect, and also remove acres of EMV. Vattenfall held an open meeting to discuss their plans. At that meeting, they failed to mention that there exists a brownfield site running right alongside the Halesfield estate, much closer to the power station. The site is already allocated for commercial development under Telford and Reekins land supply. Now, that's a perfect location for the solar farm with compatible topography and size. The closer proximity to the power station would mean less construction cost. As it is now, they've got to go under 2 roads, none if they go along by the estate, less disruption and retain the Greenbelt. I asked the developers at the meeting, why are you not building the solar farm on that land? They answered, it's already allocated as development land, which means the rental costs would be considerably more expensive than the proposed site. Now, committee, I believe companies should be totally free to generate profits, but never should it be profit at any cost. I would strongly urge you to refuse this application under CS5 and CS13 with the damage that it will cause to the local economy, the erosion of the greenbelt and the loss of even more BMV land. Nor does this application demonstrate very special circumstances unless you believe maximising an energy company's profits is special circumstance. For those reasons, please refuse this application today.
Sorry, could I ask Richard Marshall a question?
Oh, sorry.
Well, sorry, Richard, I missed what you said. This particular land that the farmer rents is what percentage of his total?
24%.
Right, thank you. That's relevant.
Okay, Jeff.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. And our last speaker is the agent, Nick Williams. Please, Nick, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. So,
good afternoon, members. Shropshire Council's own Climate Change Task Force advises the mitigation of greenhouse gas emissions is urgent and strongly supports renewable energy generation. They confirm solar farms have the potential to deliver significant environmental benefits. These include decarbonisation of energy supplies, greater energy security, and green economic growth. Benefits of this scheme include the generation of electricity to power almost 6,000 typical UK households each year. The main factor in determining the suitability of a site for solar farm development is proximity to a grid connection with capacity. Shropshire now has very few substations with sufficient capacity to accommodate a utility scale solar farm like this. A connection has been confirmed at the Hillsfield substation, just 1.4 kilometres west of the site. The applicant has submitted a detailed site selection process document which confirms the greenbelt location to be the only viable option and the chosen site is the best option within a viable distance of the substation. The site is further endorsed by the Shropshire Climate Action Partnership, who confirm the site to be within a solar farm opportunity area. Solar farms are not an uncommon feature within the greenbelt in Shropshire or the UK. Shropshire Council have already approved greenbelt solar farms near Albrighton and another one today, and Alverley. Recent appeal decisions, including one allowed last month, confirmed the benefits of renewable energy would outweigh the harm to the openness of the greenbelt. A very special circumstances statement has been submitted. Specific circumstances exist that justify this greenbelt location, including the renewable energy benefits, the significant landscape planting and biodiversity net gain, the lack of a viable alternative in terms of land outside of the greenbelt, the need for UK and local energy security. Only a third of the site is BMV land. It is currently grazed by cattle and is not secured under a long-term tenancy. The agricultural grazing use will continue alongside the solar farm, with the land instead to be grazed by sheep. Other solar farm approvals have comprised substantially more BMV land, including an application approved by the North Committee just last week. There will be a community benefit fund put in place, but this will take place outside of the planning process. A comprehensive application and officer report confirm very special circumstances exist for this development to proceed in the greenbelt, and the renewable energy benefits outweigh the small loss of BMV land and any perceived heritage harm. Appropriate mitigation is proposed. Planning conditions will effectively control the development, and as such, members are urged to support the officer's recommendation to grant planning permission today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Members, any questions for the applicant? Right on time. Thank you. Right, I open the debate to members, please. Councillor Tindall.
Yes, this has got certain similarities with the application we've just decided, but it's not binding on us, I believe. Is that correct, Kim?
It's not binding on the notes.
Sorry?
It's not, the previous decision isn't binding on this one, no.
No,
It's up to its own
just
individual.
wanted that clarifying for everybody's sake that what we decided earlier will not bind and it form a precedent for this one. I'm going to propose deferral, and the reason I wish to propose deferral are twofold. One is that the land involved, as I understand it, is now organic. I think it's gone through all of its organic transition, so it's fully organic now. And obviously, if you go from a non-organic status to organic status, there's a number of years in which you have to.
For the best part of the last 20 years.
Thank you. And it does represent a very substantial total of the holding that the Alan Chatham and his family have. It worries me, being a retired land agent, that it's only on an annual FBT. I wish you had I mustn't make comments like that, but in the ideal world, it would be easier if you had a longer term, but that's not the case. So the second case is, the first reason is because I believe it will do harm agriculturally to an organic farm. And it's not just because I'm wearing green wellies, it's because the gross margins from a sheep enterprise that will graze between the solar panels will be nothing like the gross margin of an organic dairy herd. Nothing like, won't be comparable. If there is, and we don't know whether there is, I will certainly take Councillor Richard Marshall at his word that there is a brownfield site within adequate distance to connect to the substation. If that's the case, then I think we ought to discuss, sorry, not we, but the planning officers ought to discuss with the neighbouring planning authority, Telford and Wrekin, what the capability of that site being developed for solar energy. The fact that the applicant company may have to pay a greater rent, well, I can see that that's a disadvantage to the applicant company, but on the other hand, it won't involve upsetting a really, to my mind, a very carefully considered transfer to organic farming. So I'm proposing a deferral until planning officers can sort this question out, or whether the neighbouring land, brownfield land, we were told, is capable of sustaining a solar farm.
Can I just be clear as chair, you're proposing a deferment for officers to investigate alternative sites. I'm not sure whether that's within officers' reason.
I'm sorry, Chair. I'm not sure. I hear what Councillor Tyndall's saying. It didn't really sound like a deferral. It sounded more like a list of reasons for refusal to me. But I mean, I'm not sure if it's the planning officer's job. We're assessing the planning application that's before us today, not to go away. It's not for the officers to go away and explore options on sites that haven't got an application coming forward.
Chairman, can I?
Thank you.
I think I was probably trying to be too nice to the applicant. I was just, when we have deferred planning applications while further research has been done as to alternative availabilities. But if the feeling is that we should refuse this outright, I will not stand in the way. But I think I would like to hear more people speak before I change my mind.
Thank you. Councillor Parsons.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this is a very interesting application in many ways. And members will be aware that I have supported, I think, all 6 of the previous solar farms that have come to this committee. And when you look at some of the issues regarding this particular site, then they are better than some of the other sites we've seen. The access was much better than the first site that we went to this morning. And the BMV is, I think, lower than a number of the other sites that we've seen in terms of the grade of the farming land. And if this had been in somewhere else within the county, then I would have been supporting it. But I'm not going to be supporting it today because I think it is in breach of the Greenbelt policy. And I don't believe, I do believe this is an inappropriate development in the Greenbelt. And I don't believe that the circumstances are very special enough to justify this one going ahead. This is a very open site. We looked at it this morning. We drove there on the B road between the fields on one side and the Halesfield Industrial Estate and the village of Kemberton and the fields on the other side. If these panels are placed where it's being proposed today, then those two areas, Halesfield and Kemberton, are becoming very much closer together. And I think that there isn't sufficient reason here to overrule the Greenbelt policy, and so I'll be voting against this application.
Councillor Locke. Yeah, just a point, Chair. We've had a proposal for a deferment and I didn't hear it withdrawn, so I think we should be asking for a second of that, or ask Councillor Tyndall to withdraw it formally.
Okay, I allowed further debate because because Councillor Tyndall suggested that he would like to hear further debate. Councillor Potter?
Thanks, Chair. Just in terms of consistency on my position around solar farms, I do look at it from a food security point of view. I note that the land is roughly 66% or something in that region. Not best quality, but it is permanent. It is pasture at the moment, producing significant amounts of organic milk. Should it be it's roughly about in the region of 70, 74, 75 acres. For sheep grazing, the National Sheep Association recommend roughly 10 sheep per acre for grazing. So that's roughly in the region of 70, 75 sheep. You can probably push that a bit. It's only going to produce in the region somewhere each year 100 to 120 lambs. So in terms of comparison between the amount of milk and food that this land is already producing at the moment, and with the fact that it is already in the green belt, I think that it's very difficult from a food security point of view, to be able to justify it. I know people might think that I'm anti-solar farm just for agricultural reasons, but I did support a solar farm in a previous committee that where the land wouldn't produce nowhere near the amount of food that it is producing already. So my position on this particular application is that I wouldn't be able to support it, because I think the net output from that land moving forward would be significantly less than what it is producing in terms of food already at the moment, and also it's in the green belt. And there are, I know we're judging on its own application, but there is a brownfield site nearby. There are also a number of roofs nearby, and perhaps we should be looking at putting solar panels on industrial roofs, rather than using up land that produces food for a nation where we should be more self-sufficient in that production.
Thank you. We'd like to Councillor.
Yeah, but I'm grateful to Councillor Potter for confirming my analysis of respective gross margins of sheep and dairy. But the one thing I feel, and I happen to know that this land grew sugar beet previously. I hope that's correct.
That's correct.
Thus, I don't think it's the worst kind of grade 3 land at all. I mean, it was clearly evidence from the soil that it was heavy land. Of that, there is no doubt. But heavy land can quite often mean fertile land. And again, I'm looking to my colleague to see if I'm talking rubbish or not. Well, he's sort of said either yes or no. So.
It seems to, if the figures are, it seems to be producing a significant amount of organic milk, and organic milk isn't renowned for producing high yields anyway. That's no offence, it's just the nature of organic milk production, so in terms of the possibility of what that land could produce and does produce at the minute, that's my point.
Thank you. I think in the circumstances I will withdraw my proposal for a deferral, somewhat unhappily, but I suspect I'm on a losing wicket on that one. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So that proposal is withdrawn. Councillor Lovely.
So getting back to the matter of the hand in hand, Greenbelt wise, it is about openness. And when you actually on our site visit today sat down the bottom there and saw that the site goes up the hill, I don't think you'll be able to screen that off. So visual impact wise, I think it'll be quite bad for the area. But it will affect the openness, and I am worried about the the fact that it connects Telford up with it's just an urban sprawl as far as I'm concerned. And I agree there's no local benefit, especially if it results in the loss of a farm. And food security wise, 250,000 litres of organic milk lost. So I won't be supporting this application, but that comes as no surprise.
Councillor Bagnall.
Thank you. I've all the way along it since I got these papers through and first read them, my main concern has been about the impact of effectively joining Kemberton up with Halesfield, and the impact that that would have on the openness of the countryside and so on. I am a big supporter of solar farms, and I do understand that many people are very keen on the idea of having solar farms, but not quite so keen if it means having them in their backyard. However, in this case, I do think that they have a point. I really feel that the benefits do not outweigh the disadvantages here, and I don't feel that I can support this.
Councillor Lee.
Yes, I too have got very serious concerns about the fact that this is infill between Kemberton and Telford, and the knock-on effects it's going to have on this local family business, with the potential of job losses with that business. I'm also concerned about the other thing I was going to say, that it's a strong site for its ability to protect it from urban sprawl. And I think it's going to have a very detrimental effect on the village of Kemberton and the views from that village.
Thank you. Councillor Parsons.
Yes, I'd like to move that this application is refused, and that it's refused on the grounds that it's inappropriate development within the green belt, and that it doesn't meet, on balance, the very special circumstances that would be necessary to enable that to be deemed an appropriate development. And so I'm not bringing in any of the agricultural issues. I'm simply looking for it to be refused on greenbelt policy. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll come back to the planning officer, please, to give responses to what she's heard in the debate.
Thank you, Chair. I think the first issue, perhaps with the recommendation going forward, is that we should think about, you need to include all the reasons. Obviously there's been quite a wide ranging debate, so you know that it needs to be clear about what the proposal is and how many of those reasons that councillors have stated they want to go into that, because we need to make a whole decision.
Chairman, could I come in, please?
Yes.
Councillor Tony Parsons clearly stated he doesn't want to refer to the agricultural side. Perhaps when I second his proposal, I may actually say that I think they are a material consideration. Sorry, what are you trying to say to me, Charles?
Okay.
That I'm on the right lines or completely on the wrong line?
Sorry, members, I was just going to say I have put a list of the material considerations that were outlined in the report on the screen for you to have a look at what is added in the balance here. Amongst those things, obviously the green belt is a single balancing exercise, but everything goes into that balance to make a decision.
Right, well, I will second it, and I think perhaps on the basis that there may be alternative sites and that it's intruding into the green belt. And sorry, I'm just really repeating what Tony Parsons said.
A third of the land is considered best and most versatile, and we know it is in production of a significant amount of food, and food security is important, I think, to an agricultural county such as Shropshire.
Thank you. Councillor Bang.
Yeah, just to say also with regard to landscape and visual impact, but this particular site can't be screened in quite as effective a way as many of the other sites that we have seen. So it would be very much more obvious, I believe, to people passing through the area.
Thank you, Councillor Parsons.
Not wishing to sort of go against other councillors' wishes, I'm just wary of the agricultural issue because we have passed sites 83% best and most valuable land. This is a site that is 30% best and most valuable land. I wouldn't want to see us in front of an inspector claiming it to be best and most valuable land because I don't believe that it is. I believe it's a clear breach of green belt.
Chairman, I don't want to continue this argument about that. I don't know if anybody has seen what used to be the Ministry of Agricultural Fisheries for land classification map, where the land is mapped according to grade 1, grade 2, grade 1 being Lincolnshire, grade 2 and grade 3A should be, but it's at the scale of 1 inch to 1 mile. There we go. So it's such a small scale that I really wouldn't get too hung up on whether it's 3A or 3B. If the land is capable of producing a decent amount of food, and I know decent is not an adjective that could be quantified, it's not grade 4 and it's not grade 5. It's goodish land, and that's it.
Okay, thank you. We've had a proposal and a second. I know Councillor Luff wants to say something, and then I'm going to propose to go for the vote.
Thank you. I am normally very much keen on these solar panels, being solar farms. I have got concerns about the green belt, but I'd also like to point in that it is very near and not far from the heritage church. And that is within sight, and I think that we could also, because of the green belt and because it's going to be bringing Telford into Camperton, and there's going to be no gap between the two. There is a concern there, and if we're looking for other reasons, we have got the church, which is in sight, and I'm wondering whether we could use that as another reason for not supporting this.
Chairman.
Councillor Evans.
Thank you, Chairman. Appears to me that the proposer is reluctant to include some of the items that are being put, but if that was withdrawn and Councillor Potter put a proposal, I would be more than happy to second that one, because I think it is important. It is organic land. Yes. Not normal land, it's organic and it has that status. So best and most versatile land for that purpose, I think, would add to that value and be able to put it in. But as I say, at the present time, I'm against it, but I think we need to put as many material considerations as we feel can fit around this application, just to show that we consider that there is material considerations why it should be refused.
Thank you. Councillor Lumby.
Yes, so you've got CS5, which is the greenbelt issue, and then you've got CS13, which is also the economical development and employment, which covers what Councillor Evans just said in relation to the organic farm and all the loss of it, and that it's not proven that the solar farm would give you that as an alternative. But I agree with Councillor Evans that we perhaps need a different proposal if we can't widen it out.
So now that we've got enough ingredients,
I'm going back to the proposal now to either confirm that you're happy for that proposal to stand as it is, or whether you want to change it. Councillor Parsons was made the proposal.
Yes, I'll let mine stand with the agricultural element in it then. Okay. Yeah.
Thank you, Tony.
Thank you. Can I confirm who the seconder was for that?
I think possibly I was. Yeah. I was. Oh, thank you.
Yes.
We've got quite a number of those bullet points.
Okay, so we're now going to go to the vote. Uh, Okay, so let's just confirm exactly what the proposal is. The planning officer.
Okay, it's that this application should be refused in that on balance, it is an inappropriate development within the green belt and does not meet the very special, what's the word, whatever the word, very special circumstances that would enable it to be an appropriate development in the green belt. And also that its impact on the organic agricultural land, it would also be detrimental. Anything stronger than that?
And landscape and visual impact. It's been talked about that it'll be very
Well,
visual.
I think that's the green belt issue because
Oh,
it's
okay.
the openness issue for green belt. So, okay. All right. It's the green belt issue, the organic farming issue, and the landscape and visual impact in this particularly open piece of countryside.
Okay,
That does it for me.
Thank you.
Second.
okay.
Okay, if you could indicate whether you're voting for or against the proposal just put forward and seconded for refusal of the application for the reasons given. Caroline Bagnall,
For.
Roger Evans,
For.
Christian Lee,
For.
Hilary Luff, Nigel Lumby,
For.
Jane Bryson,
For.
Ed Potter,
For.
Robert Tyndall,
For.
and Nick Higgett.
For.
Okay, that's unanimous.
I'm going to call it a 10-minute confident vote now, please, before
We now may begin, Chair.
Okay, thank you. So now we are on item 7 on the agenda, which is an application for the Wishes or Witches Little Worthing near Shrewsbury. And I pass over to the planning officer, please, to give the report.
Yeah, so this application seeks full planning permission to erect 2 new detached open market dwellings on the land currently within the curtilage of an existing dwelling. Sorry, do you want to go to the next slide? Yeah. The site is located in the hamlet of Little Worthing, which is defined as a community cluster within the SAM Dev policies that form part of the development plan for Shropshire. There have been separate outline permissions for each dwelling, but these have lapsed following the withdrawal of subsequent reserve matters applications. This first slide shows the existing and proposed plans for the development. Members will be able to note that the dwellings would be sited in tandem with the existing dwelling and will be accessed off a minor county highway known as Workhouse Bank. Existing access onto the B4386, which you can, well, you can't see from this, but we'll see again in a bit more detail later, at the bottom of the site. This will be permanently stocked up and that will be controlled or could be controlled via conditions as detailed at the end of the committee report. There are 2 oak trees protected by a tree preservation order within the hedgerow on the southwestern boundary, and conditions are also proposed to control the protection of these during development. The site is currently bound by natural hedgerows and these are proposed to be retained as part of the development. Next slide, please. We now have the floor and roof plans for plot 1 showing a 3-bedroom dwelling. Next slide. And this is the elevation plans for the dwelling on plot 1. Both dwellings are 1.5 storey in height. Next slide, please. Then we've got the floor plans for plot 2, detailed on there. Next slide. Yeah. So each property is going to obviously have its own design, as you can see from the elevation plans for plot 2 there. Next slide, please. Sample external materials are also shown on this slide, and there's going to be a combination of stone, brick and rendered walls under a plain clay tile roof and wood grain effect UPVC windows. Next slide, please. Quite a lot of slides here. So we can see that on here the technical construction details for the surface water drainage features. Next slide. This shows the drainage plan for the site. It's proposed that surface water will be disposed of via soakaways and that foul water will be disposed of via a sealed cesspit. Members will be able to note from the committee report that our technical consultee on this matter accept that sealed cesspools are the only workable option in this instance because the main provision in the area is via a pressure sewer to which the statutory undertaker will not permit additional connections. Furthermore, the site is too small for soakaways for a treatment plant or a septic tank to be installed at least 15 metres away from any building, as would be required under the Environment Agency's general binding rules. Next slide, please. This plan shows the existing and proposed accesses. The applicant has indicated a 2 by 25 metre visibility displays are achievable without significantly affecting hedges, and the justification for that has been given by the applicant's transport consultants with reference to government guidance in Manual for Streets to the satisfaction of the Development Control Highways team. And as said before, the existing access onto the B4386 will be permanently stocked up and that will be controlled by conditions. Next slide, please. So we're moving on to pictures. This is a picture from the B4386 to the south, looking up at the site. Members will be able to appreciate that the existing dwelling, a mid-20th century red brick bungalow, stands elevated towards the northwest end of a long plot. Members will be able to clearly see the 2 oak trees covered by the tree preservation order, as well as some hedgerows that bound the site. Next slide, please. This is a view from the southeast and shows the existing access that will be stocked up, and this will be controlled by conditions. Next slide. We have a view from the east again from the B road to the south of the site. Next slide, please. So these final slides are from Workhouse Bank. This image showing the existing entrance that you can see on the right. Well, just about see sort of halfway up on the right there. Next slide, please. We can now see a view of the hedgerow to the south of the existing. Next slide, please. The final image shows the view into the existing north entrance of the site. As I said, it's not going to be this entrance that will be going in. There is a slightly revised entrance, as you can see from the previous plans. But yeah, I think that's the existing. Yeah. So as I said, you appreciate that your responsibility is to make a determination in line with the development plan unless material considerations indicate otherwise. In this instance, the principle of development is acceptable in accordance with the development plan, and to some extent that's been established by the previous permissions that were allowed on the site. The proposed dwelling's layout, scale and design are considered satisfactory in this context, with the existing trees and hedges retained and would not be unduly prominent in the landscape. There are no significant residential amenity or ecological concerns. Following revised proposals, highway and drainage matters are considered acceptable, subject to attached conditions. Overall, therefore, the application is considered to accord with the principal determining criteria of the relevant development plan policies, and approval is recommended, subject to the conditions to reinforce the critical aspects of development. Thank you.
Can I ask a technical question?
Yes, Councillor Simpson.
The reason it's come to us, which I still find slightly surprising given that it has already, albeit expired, outline planning commission, is because it's contrary to an objection from the parish council and Shropshire Council's planning and development services manager. And yet your report is saying the planning officer recommends approval.
I think if you read it, like, is it part of a longer sentence that?
I'm so sorry.
What is it? I don't. Wait a second.
I'm looking at 3.1 on, well, it's not paginated, but well, I think it's the third page.
Yeah, so in accordance with the council's adopted scheme of delegation, the application is referred to planning committee for determination because the office. I'm sorry, I've got longer. Yeah, recommended approval. Yeah, contrary to objection from the parish council and Shropshire Council's planning development services manager, in consultation with the planning committee chairman and local member, agrees that material considerations have been raised that warrant. So it's the.
I do understand. I think a full stop might have been.
Well, yes. So yeah, sorry.
I won't be.
That's fair enough. Yes, noted. So
Sorry,
yes.
it was a serious point.
No, it is a serious point. But yeah, as I said, it is because yes, obviously the parish council had objected contrary to obviously the officer.
Thank you.
Recommendation.
Okay, thank you. So we go on to speakers. We have 2 speakers on this. Please, first speaker is Councillor Heather Kidd, local member.
Would it be at all possible for you to get the map up that's on the agenda? Because that actually shows the settlement, and I really need to be able to refer to that. It wasn't on my computer, and I could have shown you, but unfortunately my computer had just died.
Yeah, obviously that's the one you're sort of referring to. But so,
Because I don't understand that one at all.
You can't see that on there, but on the papers you have that one. Yes, that one.
You've got
this one.
the housing.
I mean, members obviously will.
I want to refer to that. It's just the room.
No, that's.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. If I may, when this originally came, both the parish council and I disagreed with this and were very surprised that actually it got planning permission in the form it did. We were really grateful when it expired because there are a number of issues which actually are covered, if you read the report, in that report, which should have allowed some significant changes to it and actually probably to be thrown out and refused in the way it was. If I can just start, Little Worthing is a very small settlement, and actually blocking the access onto the B4386 is a very good thing because there have been numerous accidents there, including my daughter. So I know there have been numerous accidents there. So that's important. But if you look at the settlement, and the settlement that's on your diagrams shows lots and lots of buildings there. In fact, most of those are farm buildings, they're not houses. There are, in fact, in Little Worthing, around 5 or 6, if you include bank cottage houses. We already have planning permission in place in Little Worthing for 2, on top of these that have now lapsed. So you're looking at making that settlement increase by 4 properties in a very small settlement indeed. It's quite significant. But the main reason that the parish council objected, and I object, is that there is no development anywhere in the whole of my division that does exactly what it does on there, which is create a road to open up a field to put 2 houses on it. This is not infill. It's not infill by a long stretch of the imagination, because if you look at the settlements, all of the houses are directly off one road or the other. They're either along the B4386 or they are along the Workhouse Lane. So these are completely out of character with the settlement. If you were going to build there and have it in character, one house at the bottom by the B4386 with its access to the top would actually sit in character. 2 do not. We do not have anything in that settlement like that or anywhere else. Thank you. That's exactly right. So,
which is the B4368? Sorry.
B4386 is the main road, and the one that forks off to the left is Workhouse Lane.
Oh, thank you.
So we've got a lane coming off to open up a field to put 2 houses in direct line. So if we then go on, it's totally out of character. That lane to Aston Piggott is very narrow, and actually when you come down to the bottom there, the visibility to the right is awful. You cannot see the direction to Shrewsbury. So adding extra traffic onto that is very poor, and that's where the accidents begin to happen, is where actually you have cars trying to come out of there, people avoiding them, and if the weather conditions are poor, you've got cars going off on either side of the road. It was ice for my daughter, I might point out. So this, in my opinion, and the parish's opinion, was backland development. And as I say, it's not seen anywhere else. It's not infill. You're creating infill by having one house at the bottom, then infilling all on one side. You're developing the infill. The housing numbers will still be exceeded for the whole of that cluster, because there have been 2 more, as this committee will remember, because I often come here in support of building in the right places, frequently come in support of building. This committee before Christmas allowed 2 in part of the cluster on the Rowley Hill. So just to go through the numbers in this cluster that have already been granted, it amounts to around 22. And I can actually tell you where they are. 4 in Bin Weston, 9, plus another one which we granted, which is just out of the settlement of Rowley, but across the road, and therefore using Rowley. So that's 10 in all up there. 3 in Brockton so far, 4 in Worthing, and already 2 in Little Worthing. And these 2 would be another 2. The planning officer says that these would be counted in. Actually, it doesn't count in all of the others that have recently been granted. Worthing with Shirehall Parish Council has had an awful lot of development, and that is why they're now concerned. The council's numbers rarely actually add up to what we know has been granted, and they're often lagging. So,
can you sum up, Evan?
I will also sum up. Can I also point out the planning officer tells us at 4.122 you can't walk into the village. You certainly can't. The parish already has exceeded its building by 200% plus, and this whole settlement could end up with having a maximum of 6 houses included to 10 which I think is overdevelopment for a small hamlet. So I would ask you to refuse this.
Okay, thank you. And second speaker, or do you want to ask a question first, Councillor Evans?
No.
No, that's okay. Yeah, we'll go on to the second speaker then, please, which is the agent for the application, which is Cheyenne Bedwicom. Correct?
I'm actually the owner, not the agent.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Just press this button.
Yeah. Right,
One on the right.
Thank you. I just like to give some context about this whole planning and how it lapsed. So effectively, we bought it with the planning on, the bungalow with the planning, and then it's lapsed due to the ill health of the Shropshire Council officer. We went back to the parish 5 times with different house sizes, different shapes. They never said they wanted 1, 2. So obviously, the whole purpose of this is for obviously me and my brother and both our families to have. The TPL wasn't on there when we bought it. That will actually come maybe 3 months into after purchase. We've dealt with the tree officer. He was very helpful. We've made a tree protection plan, gone over drainage numerous times, house shape. There's numerous things that have happened through this time, and no fault of our own. The planning would have not lapsed if it was a fact that someone would have got back to us, but unfortunately that didn't happen. New council officers have been very good, got back to us very timely, but that's the only reason for the lapse, really. I feel like, obviously, I wouldn't want my own children going off that busy road. It is busy, I will second that. That's why I want to come off the top. The road's actually still there. There's an actual road form that goes down to the bottom of the site. That's previously there. We're not allowed to touch that under the tree chap's guidance. So I'm not making a road. I'm just overlaying on it. He wants gravel on top. So can't really say there wasn't a road there. We're not creating a road. So it made sense to have 2 houses for me and my brother who sat behind me to have this. And if you've got any questions, I'd like to also clear them up.
Okay.
Can I just ask?
Yes.
You might be in here, but how long is the lapse over from?
So basically, the council asked us to withdraw the application. We kept holding on to it because we were worried that if it failed, we might not get the planning again. That's a big financial loss for us. But we're talking like a month. I think it went in on November. It lapsed in, I think, August. And then obviously they allowed us to add extra items to obviously pad the report to make sure it facilitated whatever the parish wanted. But it just felt like we were getting put in a position where we couldn't get it time, so we just wanted it to lapse. So we had this problem.
Okay. Any other questions, please, for the applicant, the owner? Sorry. Okay. Thanks, sir.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so I open the debate to councillors. Councillor Evans.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm more at home on this application than I am on solar farms. I did have a chance to do some looking at it this morning, and I see there was a pre-application back in 2017 for a bungalow, which then became houses in 2018. The applications then were decided by delegated officers' decision after going to the usual chairman and officers meeting when it was decided not to follow through with the objection from the community. It was agreed that it could go back and be a delegated officer's decision. I note in 615 about the reference about MD3 and about it not being applicable to this site. I would draw members' attention to what MD3 is, because I have had houses turned down in my area with the support of the parish council, and one against the wishes of the parish council, which wanted to support it because of the principle that MD3 was operable. And MD3, which is part of SAMDEV, actually says the settlement housing guideline is a significant policy consideration where development would result in a number of completions plus outstanding permissions providing more dwellings than the guideline decisions would have regard to. It's an important principle for Shropshire Council to do that, understand that, as we still are at present, that MD3 is important because there are communities, and I have a number where the housing numbers are far in excess of where they were. And also, we're seeing applications and discussions from developers to come forward about applications going in under SAMDEV because of a cluster, which will no longer be a cluster under the proposed local plan, which again, I would have thought, because it's past the legal hurdle, is now a material consideration. And it mentions in this report that it ceases to become a cluster under the revised local plan. I notice also about the reference about the housing numbers, and we've all seen, I would hope, that in recent weeks it's been notified by Shropshire Council that they have over 7 years housing supply land at present. 7 years housing supply land, where we only need 5, so we're well over the top of where we need to be to satisfy that 5 years. So this housing, I should have thought that MD3 would have said that as this cluster, as it is at present, is over the top and it is outside all our planning policies, it should not be approved. I could say more, Chairman, about sustainability and things like that, but I'll leave it at that to see what other councillors think.
Thank you. Councillor Tindall.
Oh, yes, I wanted to ask Kim Brown's views. The fact that 2 outlying planning permissions were previously granted, does that bind us in any way?
The fact that they've lapsed and you've got to consider the position as it is now.
Thank you. So we needn't pay attention to that.
I think, I mean, it's probably better answered by the planning officer, but I think it's more that they're no longer, the fallback isn't there, that there's existing planning permissions that are live, but you need to consider the application as it is now, based on the policies and the current situation.
So, yes, thank you.
I just go in there. I think what the officer is trying, the point they're trying to make is that they have lapsed. So as in, obviously, no, those outlines don't carry that much weight in that sense.
Right.
But I think what the officer is trying to point out is that those permissions were allowed under the same policies.
Oh, I see.
So as in, it's partly, obviously the core strategy and the SAMDEV policies together. That was the the development plan at the time of determination of those outline permissions, which is still what we're considering today.
So the fact that it's not yet become open, it's still a cluster, is still relevant.
Yeah. So as in, as I said, and James, do you want me to come back on that point?
Yes.
So yeah, obviously we're at a stage where obviously the plan is progressing, the new plan is progressing. At the moment, as I said, that's still at a stage where we can only, I would suggest, give it limited weight because those policies as part of that plan have not gone through an examination process, so they haven't been tested. And so at the moment, as I said, they are correct. As far as I'm aware, that cluster, it may not be permissible for development in the new plan.
It is not.
But it is now, and we're considering it in accordance with the development plan, which is the SAMDEV policies and the core strategy combined. That's what we're taking into account today. So I would say limited weight to the emerging plan.
Chairman, can I come in on Councillor Tyndall's comment?
On that point, yes.
Yeah. The difference between now and 2018 is MD3. In 2018, it was a cluster and it had an allocation of houses to it, and it was falling within that number, so it could be determined. Now, over the years, and it's happened in one of my villages, so I'm very au fait with this. In the timescale between then and now, there's been a number of applications approved, which has then brought in ND3, and the numbers are a pertinent matter to be considered, because I've had applications turned down because of this factor and the number of houses that have been had planning permission between the initial consultation and when it came before the appropriate officers.
Can I come back on that, please, Chairman?
Yes, okay then.
All right, then I promise I'll shut up. It's just that at 6.1.5, it says Shropshire Council's latest 5-year housing land supply statement reveals that there is in fact still headroom for further development in this particular cluster. So, is that false or true? Not sure who I'm putting that question to, but
There is always headroom in a cluster because it's a dispersed settlement, so housing can go on. But in Sandev, 27,000 houses were going to be built during it, which would satisfy the need for Shropshire. We're over the top of that at present, and the numbers allocated to the different areas met the housing need that the Sandev said that we needed in Shropshire. And to me, that's an important point, Chairman. And as I say, I quote MD3 again, and that was introduced by the planning inspector when they did the examination of the plan to safeguard the rural nature of our county, so that you didn't get enormous numbers because somebody said they wanted to be a cluster or a hub for that matter. If you're on way above it, it wasn't material. And if one goes back into the meetings that held at that time, it was very, very, very evident that that's what was thought. And planning officers in the past, and I can mention sites around here that have been looked at and been turned down because of this policy.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, back to the planning officer, please.
Yeah, so in the SAM, I'm sorry, I saw one there. In the SAMDEV policies, I think this cluster is looking at having 30 houses. That's what the policy sets out is 30 houses for that cluster. And I think obviously it was referred to that there was 22 that had been permitted within that cluster. So it was said that that's where obviously the officer report suggesting that there is headroom is because of that factor. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I think we've debated that for now. I would like to just pass to one or two other councillors that want to make other points. If we need to come back to that later on, then we can do. Councillor Potter, please.
Yeah, well, I'm a bit confused now because I was going to ask. So in simple terms, I don't want to labour the point. It's a cluster that was supposed to have up to 30 houses, and we're saying it's got 22. Is that correct? But I think the local member seems to be disagreeing there, and there is always some debate on this because I have a similar issue. So where are we at with that? Just for my clarity.
I haven't.
I think we should allow Heather to speak.
No.
Councillor Parsons.
Yeah, I'd just like to ask you, hopefully, fairly straightforward question. I'd like to know what the major differences are between the application we've got before us and the application that's lapsed, the 2017-18 one. What are the major differences in the two?
Yeah, to go back to that. So yeah, the outlines that have lapsed, there were two separate individual applications in outline. So as in, we didn't have the full details of those schemes. In terms of obviously the principal matters that have changed, I think there's been sort of more dialogue around access and that certainly come forward. I think originally the applications, I don't think, as far as I'm aware, the outlines didn't detail how foul waters were going to be disposed of. And there was a condition attached to those permissions that was going to be detailed at a later stage. Obviously, that has come into these applications where it's detailed in that it will be going through into sealed cesspools to dispose of that. So I think, and there's certainly been more dialogue around, as I said, yes, the trees and how they'll be protected during the development and whatnot. So I think they are the differences. We didn't have full details, the elevations and the floor plans. So. Does that answer that? Sorry.
Okay, thank you. I understand, I don't totally understand, but I do understand the debate about whether it should be louder. I've mentioned to members 7.1, which says the principle of the development is to some extent established by the previous permissions and remains acceptable given the location within a settlement designated for some new market housing. And I was reading that while that debate was
I think that was my point.
Yes. Oh, good. Okay. Glad you.
That's why I asked, have they got some bearing, even if they've expired?
Okay.
That's
Councillor Lumley.
I think because the access has been moved to the lane from the B road, that takes away one of the things that the parish council said. Certainly, the fact that the planning consent is already there and lapsed, and we've heard the reason why. I think in the round, I'm erring towards approving this.
Councillor Lyle.
I second that.
I haven't proposed.
she wants to go home.
I'm happy to propose this application.
So you're proposing acceptance of the officer's recommendation? Thank you. And for reasons of?
Do I need to give reasons? Because it's the recommendation.
Okay.
This is 7.1.
Right. Okay, we have a proposer and a seconder. Unless any other members want to come in, then I propose we go to the vote. Okay, thank you.
But proposed to accept the officer's recommendation, which has been seconded. If you could indicate whether you're voting for or against, please. Caroline Bagnall.
For.
Roger Evans.
Against.
Christian Lee.
For.
Hilary Love.
For.
Nigel Lumby.
For.
Tony Parsons.
For.
Ed Potter.
I'm abstaining because I've lost track of where we're at.
Robert Zindel.
Oh, sorry, 4.
And Nick Higley.
4.
So we've got 7 for, 1 against, and 1 abstention.
Okay, thank you. So move on to item 8 on the agenda. Now, item 8, I would like members of this committee to consider a proposal to defer. I'm proposing from the chair that we defer this. The reason for the deferral is because the agent was unable to attend due to sudden illness. And we spoke to the applicant is in agreement. So unless members feel that we need to debate this today, then I propose from the chair that it's deferred to the next meeting.
I'll second.
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
I'll third it.
Opposed to seconded. Any other members want to say anything? Otherwise, good to vote.
Okay, just do a show of hands for deferral. That's unanimous.
Thank you very much for that.
Well, we wouldn't go against our beloved chairman.
Not after what we just been through. Item 9, schedule of appeals and appeal decisions. Oh, sorry. Oh, they're just for information. Okay. That's fine. You've all seen those.
Yeah.
Thank you. Item 10 is probably a date and time of the next meeting. To be held 2 p.m. Tuesday, 11th of April, 2023. Thank you for that.
May I give my apologies in advance, and I will attempt to find a substitute.
Okay, thank you all very much. So I would like to thank all members for their input at this meeting this afternoon. Thank you for attending. Have a safe journey home. And thank you.
Thank you. Really doing it really well.